The shoe shine stand didn't disappear all at once. It faded. One stand at a time, one train station at a time, one barbershop at a time, until the thing that had been as ordinary as a newspaper box or a payphone was simply no longer there. Most people didn't notice when their last shine happened. They just stopped having them. This is the story of how that world worked and why it doesn't anymore. Picture a morning in 1955. You are heading into the office, briefcase in hand, moving through the lobby of a downtown office building, or cutting through Union Station on your way to a meeting across town. You have 15 minutes. Near the entrance, against the wall or just off the main corridor, there is a raised wooden stand. 2 or 3 chairs up on a platform, each one slightly throne-like, elevated just enough that the man working below does not have to bend. You step up. You sit down. A man in an apron pulls a cloth from his belt, snaps it once in the air, and gets to work. He does not ask many questions. He knows what he is doing. He applies the polish with a brush, works it into the leather in small circles, lets it sit for a moment, then pulls the cloth tight between both hands and starts the rhythm. Back and forth, fast, the cloth popping with each pass. Within 2 minutes, your shoes look better than they have in weeks. You pay him. Maybe you tip him well, maybe you do not. You step down and keep moving. The whole thing took less time than a cup of coffee. That was the shoe shine at its most ordinary. And for most of the 20th century, it was exactly that. Ordinary. The shoe shine stand had been part of American street life since the mid-1800s. In cities, boys as young as 8 or 9 worked corners and train platforms with a wooden box and a few tins of polish, earning pennies a shine. By the early 20th century, the trade had matured into something more permanent. Fixed stands appeared in hotel lobbies, barbershops, train stations, bus depots, and office buildings. The wooden throne, the brass footrests, the rows of polished tins lined up on a shelf below. It became a recognisable piece of the urban landscape. The men who worked those stands were skilled at something most people did not think of as a skill. They knew leather. They knew which polish worked on which shoe, how to treat a scuff, how to restore a pair that had been neglected for a season. A good shine was not just cosmetic. It conditioned the leather, extended the life of the shoe, kept the stitching from drying out and cracking. For a man who wore dress shoes every day and paid real money for them, a regular shine was not a luxury. It was maintenance. The economics made sense on both ends. A shine cost a dime in the 1930s, a quarter by the 1950s, and maybe 50 cents by the 1960s. For the customer, that was a small price to maintain an investment. A good pair of leather dress shoes cost as much as a week's groceries, so you took care of them. For the man working the stand, the volume made it viable. A busy stand in a high-traffic location could do 30 or 40 shines in a morning. The work was reliable and the overhead was low. A box, some polish, a few brushes, and a cloth. The decline did not come from any single direction. It came from several at once. The first shift was in footwear itself. Through the 1950s and into the 1960s, leather dress shoes were simply what men wore. They were worn to the office, to church, to any occasion that was not explicitly casual. There was not much of a casual category. But beginning in the 1960s, that started to change. Younger men pushed back against the formality of their fathers' wardrobes. Sneakers moved from the gymnasium to the street. Casual shoes made from synthetic materials appeared in stores and sold cheaply. A generation that had grown up watching their fathers polish shoes every Sunday night began to see that ritual as optional rather than expected. By the 1970s, the American workplace itself was shifting. Dress codes loosened. Industries that had once required a jacket and tie began tolerating open collars, then khakis, and then eventually whatever you wanted. Each step down in formality was a step away from the leather dress shoe and everything that went with it. A man wearing sneakers to the office did not need a shine. He did not think about his shoes the way his father had. The second shift was in where people moved. Downtown train stations and office lobbies that had sustained the busiest stands began losing foot traffic. Suburban office parks did not have shoe shine stands. Shopping malls did not either, at least not with any consistency. The geography of American daily life was reorganizing itself around the car, and the shoe shine stand was a pedestrian institution. It needed people on foot, moving through the same corridors every day with a few minutes to spare. When those corridors emptied, the stands went with them. The third shift was generational. The men who had grown up understanding that shoes required maintenance, who had learned to read the condition of their leather the way their fathers had, were aging out. The men coming up behind them had not been taught the same relationship to their clothes. They did not shine their own shoes at home on Sunday nights. They were not going to pay someone to do what they had never learned to value. By the 1980s, the shoe shine stand had become a relic in most American cities. A few survived in major airports, where business travellers still wore dress shoes and had time to kill between gates. A few held on in the lobbies of old downtown hotels, more as atmosphere than as a genuine service. Barbershops that had always offered a shine as part of their menu kept the chair in the corner, though fewer and fewer customers used it. The men who had worked those stands for decades retired and were not replaced. The craft passed out of common knowledge. Most people today could not tell you the difference between a wax polish and a cream, or why you would use one over the other, or how to raise a shine on a pair of calfskin Oxfords. That knowledge still exists in small pockets. There are still craftsmen who restore vintage shoes, and there are still a handful of stands in airports and hotel lobbies doing real work. But the neighbourhood stand, the corner spot, and the man in the train station who knew your shoes and knew your schedule are gone. What the shoe shine stood for, beyond the shine itself, was a particular relationship to the things you owned. Leather shoes required attention. They rewarded it. A pair of well-maintained dress shoes could last 20 years or more. They developed a patina over time, a depth of colour that only came from years of polish and wear. They became, in a real sense, yours in a way that a pair of sneakers never quite does. When you sat in that chair, you were participating in a small ritual of maintenance and care. You were saying, without saying anything, that the things you owned were worth tending, that a few minutes and a few coins spent on upkeep was a reasonable exchange for something that would last. That logic did not survive the transition to cheap, disposable footwear. When shoes became something you replaced rather than maintained, the entire infrastructure built around their care became unnecessary. The Polish tins disappeared from drugstore shelves. The brushes went, the stands came down. What we lost was not just the shine itself. It was the brief pause in the morning, the 2 minutes of sitting still while someone did careful work on something small, and the quiet exchange between a man who needed his shoes done and a man who knew how to do it. That exchange happened thousands of times a day in every American city for most of a century. Then one day it simply stopped being part of the morning. If this brought back something familiar, for example, a stand you remember, a station you passed through, or a pair of shoes your father kept on a tree in the closet. Leave a comment below. Tell us where the stand was and what you remember about it. Those details do not exist anywhere else. They only exist with you. If you found this worth your time, subscribing helps me know there is interest in keeping these stories alive. In every video, we look at another piece of American daily life that quietly changed or disappeared. and we try to understand not just what it was, but what it meant while it was there.